This is the world's most advanced processor. In entertainment, its rendering speeds render other processors obsolete. It drives the future of autonomous driving, powers cloud services for billions, helps change the course of climate change, connects communities of gamers anytime, anywhere, and uses AI to accelerate disease detection and cures. We make the world's most advanced processors, but only with your vision can we advance the world. AMD, together we advance.
Good morning, colleagues. It is my pleasure today to have Ruth Cotter with me. And Ruth is the Senior Vice President, a member of the Executive Leadership Team, and also the European and Ireland champion within AMD. You're very welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone at the beginning of the year. Very nice.
You've had a brief opportunity to get a flavor of AMD from the video. Ruth, would you be able to just perhaps elaborate a little further on AMD and who you are and what you do?
Sure. So
thank you.
AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. We're a semiconductor company, and we've been in existence since the 60s. We were founded in 1969. Today, we have 28,000 employees globally. We have a revenue run rate of about $23 billion. We play in both consumer and enterprise markets, so we're in data centers. We're all the way from gaming consoles to PCs to graphics capability, and now the new frontier of AI. And we're about $200 billion market cap, and a strong global presence and an excellent presence in Ireland.
And you've been on the acquisition trail as well, and in 2022 you acquired two companies. One of them was Xilinx, who has had a presence in Ireland since the 70s. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the rationale behind that acquisition at the time?
Yeah, so in 2021 we were about $16 billion run rate. We're about 15,000 employees, and as we looked around the corner of the future about where the semiconductor industry was going and where we wanted to steer the company, it was obvious to us that high-performance computing was our core competency. That's essentially the bleeding edge of computing and data centers in leading-edge PCs and laptops and probably desktops that many of you use on a daily basis. And we really wanted to be the de facto leader in that space. We also saw the early arrivings of the potential of AI, and we were very hardware-centric, so very chip-centric in terms of our approach, and we needed to complement the portfolio with software so that we would have the full system capability, which is what customers were looking for today. They're not just looking for the chip, they're looking for the full service around the chip. So we needed to expand and grow, and Xilinx was very attractive because it had very complementary products to AMD, but it also had very innovative software, and it had access to new markets that perhaps would help stymie the traditional cycles within semiconductors, which have tended to happen every 3 years or so. So that's why it was incredibly attractive, and it turned out to be the largest M&A transaction in semiconductor history, which was pretty fun to be part of.
Yeah, for sure. Ruth, you've been with AMD for 22 years, and originally from Cork and based now for many years in California. Yeah. And you led a lot of the change that's taken place within the organization on the back of two global leading companies coming together. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how you drove the change, particularly the cultural change with the acquisition of Xilinx and that? And then obviously on the back of all of that, were there any particular lessons learned? Is there anything that any nuggets of information you can give us?
Sure. So I led the integration of bringing the two companies together, which started the day we decided we wanted to acquire Xilinx. Before even Xilinx knew we wanted to acquire them, we were already thinking about how do you bring 5,000 new people into a company on day one. So for us, it was all about the employee experience. I think that was important. We had a pure integration track around the 5,000 people we were bringing in. And culture is important because at AMD, we believe people come first. Even with all the amazing IP that we have, the fact is, unless we have the talent to actually innovate around that IP, it's a waste of time. So we did a culture audit, which we were kind of allergic to. It sounded too big company for our liking, but we did a culture audit, and lo and behold, we discovered that we and Xilinx had way more in common than we ever imagined. And it's because we were engineering-led. We were both about making great products and making sure that in doing that, our customers were delighted. So we grounded the early sort of marketing campaign to the new employees joining us around those common themes. That was important. And then we actually wrote a culture statement. So we wrote down what our culture was. Again, something we wouldn't have imagined doing 7 or 8 years ago, but it was a way to ground at that time, 18,000 people as we came together in one common set of attributes. And we consider ourselves a very humble company because we're all about the customer and servicing the customer. And it was important that that was a key theme, as well as being very direct and open with each other. So that worked well. And then, really bringing teams together as early and as quickly as possible, because it's by doing battle together in those moments of solving some of the world's greatest challenges that people can really learn from. So those were key. From key learnings, I think having that employee experience integration track. So for anyone who has clients involved in integration, I'd strongly encourage people to have a dedicated, not a HR track, but an experience track. That was important. The other thing was we did integration completely upside down. We integrated our sales force and our supply chain last. Okay. Any management consultant will tell you to do those first because they're the key pillars of any business success. But we were both on such a success track to generate billions of dollars of revenue. We didn't want to upset it, so we did that last. And then thirdly, I think the lessons learned were don't let anything become a barrier. If we had paid attention to the hearsay as it related to the global geopolitical situation, we'd never have gotten China approval for the transaction. It was so big. Yeah. But we worked very hard and very carefully with it. And we started that planning the moment we decided we wanted to do this acquisition. And thankfully, it's great, and it's paid dividends today.
Yeah. And you mentioned the geopolitical environment, so we just stay at the kind of global side at the moment. And just to ask you about that, because obviously 2022 COVID was still ongoing. You were going through an acquisition. PC sales were going through the roof, so business was booming. Yeah. 2023 then, things have been quieter, but you also have launched your AI data center chips. So, how are you seeing the technology sector or the semiconductor sector over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, exclusive of AI, it's a choppy market backdrop in general. We've seen a lot of peaks and troughs as it relates to inventory, which has created an imbalance. And to your point, this summer we sort of saw a lot of that inventory bleed off, which has led to some replenishment, but it's also exposing the underlying market as perhaps not quite as healthy as everybody had imagined. But if you're in the data center and you're in AI, billions of dollars are about to come your way because it's mind-blowingly exciting. I've never seen anything like it in terms of the fervor, but also the thoughtful planning that's occurring. So that is exciting. 2024 is looking good. There'll be some chop in some of the consumer-centric markets in the first half of the year. We've already seen that from some of the PC vendors in particular. But the cloud guys are on the data center side are still working through a bit of inventory and others aren't. So they'll continue to work through that. But come the summer, we're very optimistic as it relates to the broader markets. But again, if you're in AI, it will mask all hardship that might otherwise have been exposed.
And perhaps we just move a little closer to home and talk about the significant investment that you had, your first investment by AMD in Ireland, $135 million research and development investment. And again, to support that 290 very high-skilled engineering research type roles. Can you talk to me a little bit about how Ireland won that investment?
Well, it's thanks to many people in this room and yourself, Mary. It's been incredible engagement. Obviously, the company we acquired had 3 decades of history here, so they were incredible advocates for the country. Access to talent was a key criteria. Infrastructure and business friendliness, I would say, were sort of the key attributes that we considered, particularly as you think about the competitiveness in the global markets today. And the willingness to partner and to understand where we were coming from and trying to help us with some of our challenges, not just in words, but in actual action and partnership and engagement. And it was a very high touch through the government's enablement and support for technology hubs within the country itself, which we would feed off of, and they off of us, which was also very attractive. And then honestly, an abundance of common sense. Like when it comes to doing business in Ireland compared to other countries that we do, cutting to the root of the issue, nothing, is off the table, and having that conversation in a very open, engaging manner was also attractive. And then all the ancillary pieces of not just the workforce, but the support and enablement of skills within that workforce, the education system, investments and advancements of STEM, which are all very important things to us, community engagement, environmental sustainability, all those are factors because we look to go larger in countries and make these types of investments where there's commonality within the communities in which we're in, and Ireland came up trumps there.
That's, and it has been to our benefit as well. This project will obviously go on for a number of years in new technologies in both Dublin and in Cork. So, it is a great win for us. Can I ask you, do you see further opportunities for Ireland within AMD?
Oh, for sure. So look, our CEO, Lisa Su, I'm sure most people know of Lisa, an incredibly successful, one of the most successful female CEOs in the world, came here, and believe she met with yourself, Mary, and others on the team.
Donal and Senan,
yeah. And she came back, and we were having a coffee, and she's like, I know you always told me this, but now that she had the opportunity to experience it for herself, it was her first time sort of really engaging actively with the country. And she said it is the most business-friendly country she's ever been in.
Okay.
And that was very high praise, I think, for someone in her position who was courted and engaged by countries all over the world. And it was really this openness to have a conversation, but also the ability to ensure that what we're doing in Ireland is our R&D gateway and hub for all of Europe. Cambridge in the UK, Munich, Milan, Croatia were all actively looking for us to go big there. And it was sort of that depth and breadth. So we see ourselves expanding. We actually see time zones very conducive in terms of, the IP that we're generating here for the communications market, for the AI market, for data centers, and that engagement with the East Coast, our R&D facilities in Boston, and then at the same time on the West Coast of the US in particular, a lot of engagement with those centers. And we're looking already, our engineering leaders are looking to grow beyond that 300 sort of headcount commitment that we've made, and that work's already started. So I see a long and strong opportunity for us in Ireland, and look forward to advocating and sponsoring it.
Terrific. One of the themes that we've had this morning, Ruth, has been on the area of sustainability. And obviously you have a very strong CSR strategy in AMD. Can I just ask you maybe one or two comments on that, particularly about obviously the demands of power now in technology? How are you mitigating, all of the aspects of power requirements from a sustainability perspective?
Yeah, and it's been interesting. Europe has sort of pushed us and led us in this area, which has also been interesting, particularly our customers, due to a very early commitment to ESG, which I think has pushed the US in the right direction, which has been very encouraging. Obviously, we have these chips that are just power-hungry consumers of power. Almost 2% of electricity in the US is driven through data centers. In Europe, I think it's almost 20% of power is utilized through data centers. So we have to be more energy efficient. We've committed to reduce our power consumption per computation by 97%. By 2025, we're well on the track there. We are looking to increase performance while reducing overall energy efficiency. So now you can have 6 AMD servers in your data center that does exactly the same work as 14 of the competition's servers. So we're really on the cutting edge of development there. And then more broadly, obviously, we have a responsibility within sort of the climate backdrop for our customers. Many of our executives are now measured. They have, as part of their bonus, an ESG goal. And they're eager to do work and partners with elements of their supply chain that's very supportive of it. So we're very happy to help there.
The supply chain element is interesting because you outsource all of your manufacturing.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, from a sustainability perspective, how do you go about ensuring that the supply chain is also on board on the whole area of sustainability?
It's not easy. Obviously on scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, we're doing very well. We're right in line with the Paris sort of climate criteria there. We'll achieve what we're looking to do by 2030. And that's all good. It's scope 3 is the greatest challenge, being held accountable for the emissions of TSMC, our largest manufacturing provider, and global foundries is a challenge. So we're happy that 100% of our supply chain have energy and greenhouse gas emission goals. We're also happy that 70% of them are using renewable energy sources. We're looking for them to continue to increase that, and we do that through engagement directly with them. But as it relates to really driving, materially impact change, it's very challenging. So we have a multi-pronged approach. First of all, we put realistic criteria that's generally achievable within our supply chain targets for our suppliers on an annual basis, and those are measured. We then work with industry bodies to try to collectively within the industry in general achieve it. We really push renewable energy sources and credits. And then last but not least, we actually partner with some of our competition as it relates to other large companies who would be large customers of our manufacturing providers to apply pressure through collective effort where we can all do better. So it's a long road. Our investors would like us to be far more ambitious and put out lofty goals, and they think it's okay if we don't quite achieve them because they think we'll be good on the journey. That's not who we are. We like to sort of exceed expectations. So there's a bit of tension, I would say, with Wall Street and what we're actually doing ourselves. But we have won many awards for being sort of on the progressive edge of what we're doing, which we're very proud of. But it is an ongoing challenge that requires daily attention. It's not an easy one to crack.
No, absolutely. And I imagine you talked about internally having targets and monitoring, etc. There's a lot of collaboration there, and I presume in the same vein, with that collaboration, there's a lot of joint targets, monitoring, etc., taking place to enable the implementation to be successful and to ensure that these targets have been achieved.
Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure. The good news is, I think globally we're committed as an aggregate. When it actually comes down to what are you going to be responsible for within your house, that's sort of where the challenges come.
Yeah.
But that's why we believe by being a little bit progressive and maybe a little bit edgier than even some of the larger companies, that's the right thing to do because it applies pressure. But we also use the industry bodies that we're members of and the communities in which we're present also make sure that we're held accountable, as do our shareholders. There's market cap, now associated with ESG goals and targets, and there are ESG-centric investors very pervasive in Wall Street, not just based in Europe nowadays, that make sure that we're achieving what we need to do. And if they don't, they're very quick to, you know, put it on your proxy at your annual meeting, which immediately gets the board of directors' attention, which there's no harm in.
No, that's true. Can I ask you then, again, from an Ireland perspective, what do you think that Ireland should be doing in order to be and to continue to be attractive to the semiconductor industry?
Well, I think Ireland has been doing a really good job. I think that the key differentiator, as I look inside the company and the reactions of people who have not had much exposure to Ireland, is absolutely the talent pool. So continuing to foster that, grow it, expand it, ensure that it continues to be flexible, highly educated. I think that's important. I think there's a huge opportunity with the dawning of AI. We're literally barely at day one. And the whole world's trying to figure it out. And there are no AI skills out there, right? We're all pilfering from each other. Our strategy now is actually to bring in new college graduates and skill them in-house, because there's very basic sort of education capability out there. And what we're seeing is incredible cross-collaboration in-house between our seasoned hardware engineers in CPUs and GPUs, now collaborating with sort of AI-centric new college graduates, and the fertilization of innovation. It's amazing, and we're very excited about where that can eventually go. But we're spending a lot of time on development of skills in-house ourselves. So wherever Ireland can sort of help and become that kind of hub, because Silicon Valley got a jump start as it relates to AI from what we can see compared to other countries. And there's a lot of opportunity for folks if they lean in on that side of the workforce. And then secondly, I think, which another thing that the country does very well that perhaps other countries don't necessarily do, the key decision makers don't always sit within region. The key decision makers often sit elsewhere. And to continue to foster those relationships, not just within the region of Ireland and the country, but also where the key decision makers sit, is something that you've done very well, and I would strongly encourage you to do that, because many other countries haven't got that model down. And it's an absolute differentiator when push comes to shove, because it's in a, you know, it's in a boardroom in Austin and Texas where we'll ultimately decide, is it Ireland, is it Singapore, you know, is it Brazil? And your voice and presence is often there as a country. And then I know you said two, but I'll go for a third. It's the government remaining very, very focused in supporting technology and building Ireland as a strong indigenous hub for technology, and encouraging startups within the country, because that fuels innovation that attracts company like AMD and many others, because there's an already pool of not only innovation capability, but it becomes part of the network and the culture of the sort of physical presence that's really attractive.
That's very helpful, Ruth. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time now, and we're down to the last few minutes. So if you don't mind, I'll just ask our colleagues and guests if there's any questions that they'd like to ask Ruth. And if there are, Ruth, you're very happy to take them, I understand.
Delighted, yeah.
So,
happy
yep,
to.
great.
Oh, we have an iPad here.
Super. Okay, I have a few, so we'll be very quick.
Okay.
You mentioned geopolitics and how AMD acted in the face of risks. How would you suggest businesses navigate the geopolitical narratives around risks?
First of all, you need to understand them. And you could be a magician to trying to understand them nowadays. It's such a fluid situation. I think our approach is certainly leaving it within the company for those experts to manage, and ensuring the rest of the company doesn't get distracted, right? Our team in China could get highly distracted in terms of their innovation capability. But we make sure that we're very open, we're very clear in our communications, everyone understands sort of our position internally, and then making sure that you have very strong engagement with governments so that you are at least in the chain of information. So we're part of President Biden's sort of technology advisory group in the US. Lisa's our representative with that. That's very helpful. We're part of industry bodies globally, which is also very, very helpful. And just don't get distracted. There's a lot of posturing that goes on, and it's often not for us as a public company to be getting too distracted by it.
Sure. I think that's very useful. And Ruth, we're just out of time. I see the red is flashing there. So can I, on behalf of everybody here today, thank you for the generosity of your time, but also for the insights that you've provided. It's been really stimulating conversation, and certainly there are some takeaways as well. You're really enthusiastic, and certainly it's been a real pleasure to engage with you. Thank you for taking the time, and indeed staying on to be with us here today. Ruth will be winging her way back to California very shortly, so we thank you for that, and we very much value and appreciate AMD investment in business in Ireland. So Happy New Year and continued success to you and to AMD.
Thank you, Mary. It was an absolute
Our pleasure.
pleasure.